Hi guys. This is going to be the first part of the recorded series of the G Sheets workshop that Vivian and I said that we'd be recording. So I'll be going over my beginning intermediate section that I covered in the workshop this past Tuesday, and Vivian will be finishing up with her intermediate advanced after my segment. So I'll basically just be doing a rundown of kind of a demo of all the functionalities I talked about in G Sheets. And yeah, just like doing all that for you guys right now. So to recap again, here's the basic vocab that you need. Rows are going to be like all of these here. Columns are kind of self-explanatory. They're opposite rows. Cells are each individual blocks that contain any sort of data. Each sheet is like, okay, so there's the G Sheet file, which is like the practice sheet that we have named here. And then there are individual sheets within each file. So that'll be like here, in this case, sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet, ignore the jumping. Okay, and there's also formulas, which I'll cover later on. And also ranges. Ranges are like, yeah, just what you call a bunch of highlighted cells. So, okay, to go over some basic moves, there's obviously entering data into new cells, which would be like, I don't know, keyboard mashing. That's a new type of data. It's a string. There's also ways to select data. So I mentioned before, you can select like a range of data like by clicking and holding down and dragging, but you can also hold down Command or Control or whatever it is on your computer to select multiple rows and columns. A caveat is that if you mix like a bunch of rows and columns together like this, some of what we're going to be talking about later on isn't, you won't be able to do some of the functionalities. So for example, if I try to hide rows like this, it'll say that there's a problem because they can't hide like rows and columns at the same time. So you can either only select like a few select columns at once or a few select rows. Hiding and deleting have some differences. So let's say that I want to delete these rows. Then it like completely erases everything that was not in not only this segment, but also across the entire row. So most times we don't want that. So what you want to do instead is you'd want to clear this. So sometimes if you right click, there'll be an option that says clear this range. If you highlight like entire columns, that'll be an option, clear selected columns. So that's more often what you'd want, or you can just press the backspace key. So to move stuff, you can highlight, your data range, and then you drag with the top border of the area that you've selected to move stuff. So there's that. You can also search for certain data names or like whatever like keywords that you have inside your sheet, but Control F only works inside each sheet that you're working on. So let's see, if I want to say, if you want to look for price, or wait, like Vivian, sure. It'll only show that name within that sheet, but you see that in this sheet, there's another Vivian. It won't like look that up for you automatically. You have to like scroll between all sheets to actually find each instance of that data. And to insert data, you can right click and insert rows, insert columns. It kind of works like deleting columns and rows in that it places an entire empty row across like the range of the entire sheet. So yeah, sometimes that's helpful, sometimes it's not. There's also a method of duplicating data. So let's say that I want to copy this like exact phrase %date across, I don't know, these next two rows, next two columns, C and D. In that case, I'll drag over two spaces to copy both % and date. But if I only drag over one space, then it only copies over date. Oh wait, no, percent, because it works from left to right. So if I do that again, it'll just say percent again. So just pay close attention to how much data you want to copy versus like the space that you're giving it to copy into. There's also, of course, the titular undoing, Control Z, like what would we do without that? You can also change the width or height of a row and column. So if you drag, this, you can resize the column to whatever your preference is. Same thing for the rows. Rows, I think, have a predefined like height of like 26 pixels or something. And columns are usually also spaced out as well. But in this case, we formatted the data so it fits our needs for this demo. So that's why it looks kind of off. You can also add new sheets. So you see down here that we have a lot of sheets for practice. Whenever you're making a new sheet, you just press that. But you can change the color of each sheet just for like, easier readability. I don't know if you want to color code things, that's up to you as well. You can rename the sheet. So it's like, let's say I want to name this demo sheet. And you can also do something called protect the sheet. So that means that, I think Vivian might have also covered this in her part, but what protecting ranges or sheets let you do is it prevents certain people from not accessing, but like actually being able to see the data that's in that range and sheet. So let's say for my description, demo protected. It's early in the morning, guys. I'm sorry. And to do that, we just set permissions and restrict. So we can choose whether we just want to show a warning, as in like, this is, I don't know, like spoiler material, something, it's like a spoiler tag. And, but we can also choose to restrict who can edit this range. So you can see, you can add people here to let them know that they're like one of the only people who can like access that certain part of the sheet. For now, since you don't need it, I won't be doing much with it. But a protected sheet has this lock mark on it, which means that, yeah, obviously not everyone who has access to this sheet file can see this sheet. For now, I'm going to delete it. Okay. And I'll go through what each of these menu items mean for now. It might look kind of different for you probably because I'm sharing this with a split screen, which means that not all the menu items can fit and I have to do this to make everything show. But so I'll go through everything basic. So there's an undo, redo, print. You can choose, I think, to save it to a PDF or whatever other format from here, as well as downloads. Paint format, which I'm guessing lets you, I don't know, edit things. And there's also the zoom. So there's also the shortcut of just being able to, press command minus plus, but there's another way to do that. You can format certain things as currency. So this is actually like the data that's stored in here is a 0.6, but we made it show up as money, right? And this shows this as a percentage instead. If I just said 0.6 here, wait, let's remove the percent sign. I don't want it to show as percent. If I want to change this to money, I can add spaces like empty zeros to the end with that. And this just shows different ways that, like, I don't know why it still shows data for this, but this shows different ways that, like different statuses of the sheet and how certain data could be presented in different formats. Of course, font type font size, and just formatting text-wise. So color, borders. I can highlight like certain ranges and make them stand out more by adding borders of certain like kinds. You can merge cells. So that merges, oh, yeah. A caveat is that merging only keeps like, what's up here. So like garlic, it would just make that entire box one cell and just fill it with that one data type. And this is like just alignment, vertical alignment. We'll cover wrapping soon. Text rotation. I don't know who uses this or whether anyone would need to use this, but that's a function. You can also insert links with Control K to hyperlink to like different websites or maybe like even other sheets. There's also commenting, inserting charts, filters, functions. Functions we'll cover soon as well. Functions and formulas are synonyms. Right to left sheet, left to right cell, formatting things. Yeah, so that's the basic stuff. Text wrapping. Okay, so I'd like to bring your attention to this cell here. It says, look at this very long sentence of text that moves into other cells. Obviously, this text cell holds more data than than the width of the column that it's in. So right now, the format I think is in overflow. So that's why it's showing more than what's actually held in this column. But to change that to actually make sure they can read like everything without having it squish into other columns and like, prevent you from actually seeing what's in here by, I don't know, let's, for example, say text blocker. Like putting more data into the next column that it like, as it overflows into, prevents it from, it'll clip it regardless of whether you're doing overflow or clip. So to prevent this, we want to change the text wrapping format into wrap. So it changes the row height of this cell, but of like the entire row, but it also lets you see like the data inside the column without having it like overlap and feed into different cells. So for now, I'll change that back to clipping though, because it makes everything look prettier on the sheet. Okay. But yeah, like it says here, most of the time you'll want to go with wrap so that you can see everything. As long as you're not changing, everything here to make like the rest of the data on this row a little less legible, and that'll be like a net negative. Okay, so I'll cover how to make charts and graphs right now. So what I have here is a pre-prepared table of values. I've just named my header, like column 1, column 2, column 3, and row 1 through 3. This is the data that I want to have graphed. So first off, to make a table, well, to make a graph out of this table, I'd want to highlight the range that I want to make the graph out of, and then I just go to Insert and press Chart. Yeah, it takes a while to do it. But so this is the default chart type that G Sheets decided that would be most helpful in displaying my data. But if I want to make, for example, like a line graph, I can totally do that, or like an area thing. There are so many different graph styles here. Yeah. So just look through each of the different like chart types and choose what would be most suitable for your, I don't know, assignment or your purpose that you need to use it for. Stacking, there's also like it depends on the chart type that you choose, but stacking is also an option for you to customize. You can manually select the data range from here that's being presented on this chart as well. A38 through D 41 is the data that's hidden behind this chart. I just realized, sorry, I'll move that down so it's a little bit clearer for you guys to see. Yeah, anyways, going back to editing this chart, you can manually select from here. The y-axis, I mean, not y-axis, x-axis is from A38 to A41. The series is just another name for y-axis. Yeah, it just like lets you choose each of the y-axes based on the names that you give to the headers here. You can also switch rows and columns if you really want. Customization kind of lets you go beyond what's pre-prepared for you in that you can edit things like chart and axis titles. So here it's like column 1, column 2, column 3. It's kind of boring. Let's say I want to change that to basic data. I don't know, basic data. I'm very creative today. This also lets you choose where you want to place that title. I think you can choose font as well. Yeah, theme default. Yeah, go nuts. You can also change horizontal axes. Let's say, I don't know. What should rows be indicative of? Let's just say rows. And then same thing for vertical. Let's go with column. Yeah, you can choose to give it certain embolding or italicizing if you want to make it like, if you want to make the labels on the X or Y axes stand out more. There's also series. That's just more for Y axis things. Legend is this bit. It shows you what each color stands for. You can also change, the legend format of that. These are more in-depth horizontal and vertical axis settings, more than just like changing the name of what shows up here. That's for the label font. So that means you're changing the data that's presented here rather than, like the label for each axis. You can also change grid lines and ticks. So those are the lines appearing in the background here. You can change like the range or spacing of them if you want. So yeah, that's basically all you can do for sheets. Usually when you're making sheets out of tables like this, you don't just stop at like making a chart here, right? You can copy paste into like slides and docs for like whatever lab reports you're working on. And whenever you do that, there are two options. So, well, actually three options. You can, like if you choose to insert a chart like from here, I mean, like not in this sheet file, but on the doc or slides that you want to put this chart on, it lets you choose between linking to Spreadsheet and pasting Unlinked. So pasting Unlinked it's pretty much like taking a screenshot of this like chart and just like copying that into the doc or slide, in that you can't update it whenever you want. Linking to Spreadsheet it has like literally like a chain icon here at the top right. But I think if you click on that, it lets you change like the chart depending on if you've updated the data in the table here within the sheet. So you don't have to like keep, pasting unlinked each time. There's also another way for you to insert, like, okay, I can't show it on here. I don't know why I keep clicking the menu, but on the Docker Sheets, you press insert and then chart, and from sheets, it like just shows you a menu of like a bunch of sheets that you can select, like sheet files that you can select from that have charts in them within your entire Google account. So it gives you access to like every single possible chart you could be inserting. Yeah. So I'll move on to table formatting. I kept calling this a header, and that's because how I refer to it later on here in table formatting. So they're like the titles of the columns of the data that this holds. Let's say that I want to make this more easily readable. For example, like this. This like kind of pops into your eyes a little bit more than, for example, like all of the other data here. Okay, something weird just happened. But anyways, continuing. If I want to make this range pop out like the one above, I just go into Format and then go into Alternating Colors. And you get to choose from like a bunch of different, color styles or like alternating things just to make it easier on your eyes and make it more obvious for whoever's accessing this sheet that this is indeed a table. So yeah, you can choose whatever. Let's make it hideous. No, just kidding. I want to keep it the default because it looks nice. Okay, so right now I will go into formulas. So like I said earlier, functions and not format. What else? What was I doing? Functions and formulas are in essence the same thing. They are the same thing. I don't know why I said in essence, but these are the probably most used functions in like G Sheets period, though there are like a whole bunch more that you could use. Oh my God. Oh my God. Can you imagine having to go through like every single one of these functions and figure out like what they do? This is insane. I don't think anyone would ever need like all these functions ever, but you know, if you need a very specific function to do whatever job that you want to do with sheets, then odds are you can probably find it here or like do a mix and match between the inputs and outputs of these functions to create what you need. Yeah. So I'll go over like the most commonly used functions here. So let's say that I want to, I don't know, let's add all the data ranges from like B4 to B7. Then, yeah, if you see up here, I've added an equal sign, and that's indicative of me wanting to start like a new function. So following this example on the side, value 1 and value 2, we want to add, well, for now, since we haven't covered ranges yet, I'll just add the values from B4 and B5. So not A4, B4, comma, B5. And you'll see that before you press the enter space to actually make this function happen, there's a pop-up that shows what's actually going to be inserted here. So just make sure, like with your eyes, that you check that it's actually what, like the behavior that you're expecting. And if so, you can click and that value will apply to down here. It'll automatically set the formatting. So it, even though like on the data range, it shows that it's like only 0.6 and like 1.2 without the extra 0 and the $sign, it'll like this like function will automatically fix itself so that it aligns with like, the $signs and the zeros. Yeah. And there are also, whenever you're questioning like whatever a certain function does, you can just, like start the function and it'll show like what the function is expecting as its input. And sometimes it also shows the output as well. So for example, in the doc here, SUMIF, like, yeah, you can just start the parentheses. Sometimes on my end, it doesn't show the question mark for some reason. So that's just a way to make sure that this shows up. Yeah, sometimes it does that, but not before you type in the open parentheses, I believe, for me. Okay, and like I mentioned earlier, but for formulas, you don't have to limit them to just accepting inputs from like, for example, one cell and do like add, for example, B4 plus 2 and make that like pop up here. You can apply formulas to like entire ranges of data as well, which I think Vivian or I will cover later. Okay, I will go into splitting text to columns. So this is actually also done with formulas. Um, Before splitting text to columns, I'll like do the reverse. So I'll concatenate these columns so that it shows all of like our names here together. So in order to do that, that's actually a function. Technically, it doesn't have a name because it's just displaying data in a different way. It doesn't do anything to manipulate that data, but since it has the equal sign in front, that means it's a formula. So let's say this is what A22 plus A20, no, B22, A22, you can't say plus. Yeah, see, it shows what data values in A22 right now, 22, and you might think B22 would be the obvious answer, but like it shows here, Vivian Chu is shown without a space. You want a space so you can like split it easier later on, and just to make it easier on the reader. So to do that, you want to enter a space in between A22 and B22, and see it shows Vivian's name with a space in the middle. So that's how you do that. And you just do the same with everything else down here as well. So this would be like my name, not A22, A23, and space, and B23. Just like a note for whenever you're using functions and having to use and, make sure that you don't miss an and sign. It's really easy to get mixed up and like forget that with like more complicated functions. But yeah. And sometimes things like suggested autofills show up. So it'll apply this function for you, like this and space and, without you having to manually type everything in. Anyways, now that we have this concatenated data, we want to split it again. So going back to split text to columns, we want to select this range, and I believe, yeah, you need to select from the menu data and then split text to columns. See, there's something called a separator that automates this process for you, but just to be on the safe side, I'm going to manually set it to be space, even though like detecting automatically should sort by space. So doing that split it kind of weird like this, because there are two spaces between Matthew and Brown, I guess. And there's also a space at the end of like Chu space Kim space Brown. And that's why it went over like a few columns more than expected. But yeah, see, there's an extra space. Big yuck, don't want that. So we try separator. Sure, let's go with detect automatically this time. Oh, hold on, some temporary difficulties. Okay, yeah. So that is the expected behavior of that function. So yeah, there's that. We went over combining cells. Yeah, kind of coming to the ends of the beginner portions here. You have the function of like the choice of adding checkboxes. So that's just insert checkbox. I don't know what you'd use this for. Maybe if you use Sheets, kind of like a to-dos list kind of thing, you could use checkboxes to mark what you've done. Yeah, it's just as simple a matter as highlighting the range that you want to add the checkboxes to and inserting checkboxes there. You can also make comments just by, yeah, adding here. There's a shortcut, there's a keyboard shortcut that's like Command or Control Option M if you really want. We went over this in our first episode as well, but you can actually assign like certain people tasks by using the @ sign, in addition to also just leaving comments like you usually would. You can share your sheets with different people with, links. Yeah, pretty basic stuff. Saving files. So I kind of mentioned, I skimmed over this earlier, but if you go into print and I think, okay, right now it just automates like Google, but sometimes you can choose to, I guess, print from PDF in like a pop-up that sometimes appears. And from there on, you can choose like a format of the file that you want to save it in. But just for clarity's sake, there's also a manual way of doing that. So you download the file in a different format. So Microsoft Excel, Google Sheets versus Excel, that's always a question. But sometimes if you want to make things a PDF, you can save it through that. Web pages, CSVs, TSVs. CSVs and TSVs are pretty useful for just analyzing data, parsing data. PDFs, while they're like pretty generally like understandable, sometimes G Sheets will do this like weird formatting thing where it won't save every, like it'll show the PDF strangely. So your best bets are honestly using Excel, CSV, and TSV formats. Just general tips to getting used to G Sheets as a beginner are that you just like want to try literally everything there is about Sheets. There's like literally so many functions that I covered. Like who uses who uses text rotations in Sheets? But apparently some people do. Apparently that's a function. So just like messing around with things like that will definitely get you more used to and more like, I guess, familiar with everything G Sheets has to offer as a beginner. And I will go very briefly into something like some things that intermediate levels cover. So just to scroll up to here, if you want to get rid of grid lines, so you want to make your life chaos, sure, go ahead. I don't know about you, but this is really hard to read, so I prefer grid lines. But if this is something, if grid lines are something that you don't want having appearing on your sheets, that's the way to do that. Okay, and there's also methods of hiding entire columns. So this is different from protecting ranges in that protecting is like you set like clear restrictions on people who can view certain ranges or sheets. Hiding is just a general way for you to prevent, why is this doing this? Yeah, prevent certain people from seeing, well, not prevent certain people, but you basically just hide entire rows and columns. There's really no better way to explain it. Yeah, basically shrink things so not everything appears at once. Did the weird thing again. Anyways, you can revert this just by clicking the arrows there. Yeah, basically when you hide rows and columns, you can't do it when you've selected rows and columns. And whenever you hide things, they like go all the way to the end of the sheet. Yeah. Freeze panes. So I will switch over to this sheet really quickly. So let's say that whenever you like scroll through data, whenever you scroll through data, you want to be able to see like literally everything in this first like row or column. To do that, you'd want to freeze panes. But as you can see, it doesn't always show up because I've selected both rows and columns. This is like a whole like weird thing, but basically to make sure that certain rows and columns are frozen, you want to go to view and then freeze. Let's say right now it's like one row, right? You can also choose to freeze 2 rows. Or actually, let's say, okay, from, just to make this kind of easier to show, you have a sheet that has no freeze panes, which means when you scroll, that's literally all you can see. Whatever you scroll to is all you can see. But to freeze certain rows, let's say the first row, doing that lets you see whatever is stored in the first row, regardless of like how far down you might be scrolled. And to add a new frozen column, like you guys saw earlier, this behavior is kind of strange in that when you scroll, right now I'm scrolling just strictly to the right, it hides, it treats the, it treats frozen row, like what is it, columns, like they're nothing when you're just scrolling across a row. But the same goes for when you scroll down. It completely ignores that you've frozen out this, like these rows when you're scrolling through columns. Yeah, and the only thing that like remains static is whatever ranges overlap with the frozen rows and columns. Yeah. Oh, you're not restricted to just like one or two. You can like scroll, you can place your cursor all the way down here, select the cell, and freeze up to that row, in which case, okay, let's say right here. It like continues scrolling through all of the cells below this. Yeah. So now I will, it was one row. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and just to make sure that, you know, freeze panes worked, these lines are what that means. And you can also manually drag these lines around to shift the range of frozen like values that you want to have. Something strange is that, well, I guess not strange in that more so than inconvenient is that you can't freeze like certain data ranges like here, since they don't go all the way up to like the start of each column or like row. You can't just select this as a freeze range. Like it has to be from um, it has to span from like column A to column like, for example, F or like E or something. It has to start at A. Same thing for rows. It has to start at row 1. So yeah, that's the weird caveat with freeze panes. It's pretty convenient if you want to keep having access to like certain data values as you're working through like an entire sheet. But yeah, okay, I think that's all for my beginner to intermediate part. So I will leave it off to Vivian and stop recording now. How do I stop recording?
All right, hello, I'm Vivian Chu. I will be taking the Sheets tutorial from here on out. And so where we're going to start first is relative and absolute references. And so this has to do a lot with formulas and how you use your formulas. And so let's look at our data right here. We have a column of numbers. Name your data a bit better than me. We're going to do a logical comparison. So let's do if this cell is greater than 2. Okay, so we'll see we have nice autofill. Thank you. And this is a logical comparison because we end up with a true or false statement. And so if we look at this, this formula is looking to this cell right here to the left. And that's why we can drag it down, because then this is looking to this 3 to the left. That is what we call a relative reference, because it's looking somewhere where the formula in the cell is it matters where you're looking at. And so if we copy this right here, and we're going to see this happen, this formula is still looking to the left. And so that's why it's relative to where the formula is at. And so if we drag it down, we'll get some trues and falses, okay? And now we're going to talk a little bit more about absolute references. This is going to be our reference number 4 right here. Let's do just another logical comparison. Let's look to the left. It's greater than this number. And how we know it's an absolute reference is when we add these dollar signs. But a quick way to do it is a 4. And so it should look like this. That's an absolute reference. And then we'll autofill because thank you so much, Sheets. And so let's see what's happening here. So this is the F10 is still looking to the left, right? But then the E10 never moves. And if we scroll down, the E10 never moves. The F and the rows do, but nothing else is. And so if we do this again, copy this one again and paste it right here, we're still looking at E10. And that's what an absolute reference is that no matter where you paste that formula, whatever you absolutely reference will stay there. It will not move. And so what's great about that is that if I change this reference number to 3, some of the values will change. And so rather than having to go in and change each formula by itself, I can just change the absolute reference and all the formulas will adjust to that. So that's really convenient when you're comparing data with absolute references. So now let's talk a bit more about formulas across sheets. And so let's say we want to sum up the numbers in A34 to A43 on the beginner sheet. So let's look at those numbers. Okay, A34, okay, cool. We want to sum up, where did they go? We want to sum up these numbers right here, okay? And I already summed them up. We're looking to get 277. And so how we're going to do that on this intermediate sheet when we don't exactly have the data right in front of us. And so how would we just start with writing a formula? Let's start with the sum. And so we're going to want the region, but the region is on the beginner sheet, so let's write that. And how we know it's going to be a formula across the sheet is we're going to use not a dollar sign this time, but an exclamation mark. And then we're going to do, it should be, now it's just the range. So beginner exclamation mark and then A34 to A43. We'll turn orange, which is great. We'll sum, we'll get 277. That is exactly what we wanted. So as long as you make sure that you have the exclamation mark, and it's just because this sheet was called beginner. If it was called sheet 1, you put in sheet 1 or whatever that title was. And so yes, that's the exclamation mark. Okay, so let's move on to some drop downs. You'll see this a lot in maybe your class discussions when they have you click the 1, 2, or 3 depending on your progress. So let's add those. Highlight some cells. Go to data, and then data validation. So this is our cell range where we are. We're at C22 to F22. We open that up. Yep, that's the range you want. That's good. We're going to want to pick list of items. And so we're going to enter the items separated by a comma. So let's just do 0, 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to want to make sure that this is checked so that we actually have a drop down. And so yeah, let's save. So now we can go in and we can pick, oh, I have conditional formatting on them right now, but we'll talk about this a bit later. And so I can go in and I can pick all these different numbers and such. But I can also do this with, not just numbers. We can do fruits. We can do, favorite fruits. Okay. And then we can show some validation text. We can say, please pick your favorite fruit. Okay. Cool. Input must be an item. Yes, that is true. So we pick apple, banana. It's just saying it's invalid because they were numbers originally. Okay, cool. So now, there we go. We can pick different items. That's cool. So let's talk a bit more about conditional formatting. You saw a little bit about that before. We have a pop-up right here, which is nice and convenient, but you can also do this by highlighting and then going to format and the conditional formatting. So what is conditional formatting? If we really do just dissect the words, it's formatting based on a condition or a rule. And so that's why right here it says conditional format rules. And so what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to determine what format we want based on what rules we want or what we have. So if we highlight this data right here, we see that we have various numbers. I can, come on, highlight correctly, come on. There we go, okay. So we can add a rule in this range. So from A25, my dude, to D27, we can format the cells if the number in it is equal to 1, right? And so now we see that we just select the ones, and that's kind of how we're going to do things with our rules. Let's just say we keep it green. We can add another rule in this same range, A25, to be is equal to, I can make it equal to 2 and turn it yellow. And keep going. I wish I had my range set right for me, but it's okay. Equals to 2, 3. I can turn it to red. Okay, and I can keep going for all these numbers. And what's great about this conditional formatting is that it adjusts itself, really. And so, yeah, we have a 1 in this column, but if I change it to 2, it'll turn yellow for you. And so why this formatting is helpful is that even if your data changes and, your format will still adjust with your data changes. And so let's do a bit, that was kind of a simple example just to intro you into conditional formatting. But let's go into this little formula right here. So I have these questions up here at the top. It's did I wake up? Did I go to class? Did I eat lunch? Did I do? So let's say I go about my day and I put Y as where I do things. Let's say I put a yes here, and so on. And so let's say I do a bunch of different things throughout my week, and I keep track of it. So let's say wherever there's a Y, I want to highlight it yellow. Okay, so we're gonna just highlight this. We're gonna add a format rule. So it already highlights things because the automatic rule is set if it's not empty. I want to do text starts with Y. Cool. Nothing changes. I'll turn them yellow. Okay, cool. So that was pretty simple. And so if I go in here and add Y here, it'll turn yellow. Let's say I want to turn the whole row that color though. And so we're going to delete this. We're going to start doing a bit of a more complicated rule here in conditional formatting. And so let's see. We want to turn the whole row yellow if I have a Y here, or if I have a Y here, or here, or here. And so that keyword right there is or. So that's what we're going to do our custom formula with. So we're going to start with the formula, which is equal sign, or. And we're going to want to lock the B31, because that's where our conditional formatting will start checking if there's Y's. So lock B31 equals to, now last row we have to do text contains, but because this rule is in a format, we have to make sure it's equal to a certain letter. So it'll be in double quotes. Then we also want to check if the C column is equal to Y, or the D column is equal to Y, or the E column is equal to Y. Okay, cool. So I'm going to turn those yellow. Okay, awesome. And so now we see that we can highlight the whole row, but let's say if I only have one Y in this row, if I delete this Y, I'm going to turn it white. Okay, so that's cool. All right. So that's how you can turn the whole row yellow if you choose. And so let's say I raise my standards and I say if I both wake up and I go to class, I want to turn that row green. Okay, and so once again, that keyword right there is and. So let's add another rule. Do a custom formula equals and. Okay, if P31, gotta make sure I'm in caps lock. C31. Let's try this out and let's see what happens. Y. So that's good. We turn it yellow. And so now we see that we have two Y's here, but we didn't turn the row green. Like, why is that? And so if we look into our format rules, we'll notice that we have this yellow one comes first and this green one comes second. And so what that's telling Sheets is that I want to make sure I prioritize this formula before I do this one. But the truth is that we want the and to happen before the or. And so we're going to switch that and we'll notice that it turns green just like we want it. And so kind of the nitpicky stuff about conditional formatting is that you got to know the hierarchy of how you want your rules to be applied and in what order. Because in this order, we want it to turn green because this is a higher precedent rule for us. Okay. Let's say I keep raising my standards and I want to say if I do any 3 out of the 4, I will say I had a good day. I will turn that row green. And so let's delete this. We'll keep the ors to make sure things are yellow. And so any 3 out of the 4. And so how we're gonna do that is we're gonna do a Countif formula. And from the name, I'm gonna count it if it's a Y. Let's write that formula. Countif. Okay, cool. So my range is going to be this whole row, right? I'm going to want to count how many Y's are in that row and then double quotes Y. Okay, cool. Autofill. Thank you. So let's make sure we're looking at this right. So this row has 2 Y's. Cool. 2, 3, 0, 3. Awesome. And so now I want to make sure if this is greater than 2, meaning I'll have 3, and then I will drag this formula down. Let's make sure this is right. So I have 2. 2 is not greater than 2. 1 is not greater than 2. 3 is greater than 2. Nothing. Great. Okay, so now let's apply our conditional formatting rules. Let's add a rule. Custom formula. So an easy way to do this is that if you can just do, you can have this Countif just like keep staying here forever, and you can just do if this cell is true, then highlight it green, you know. And so we can try that. FF31. We're going to want to make sure we lock F though, because we want to make sure we stay in this column. Equals true. Cool. So we see that when these are true, we turn them green. If not, we keep them yellow, but our yellow highlighting in the row still works. And we notice that we took out that Y, okay, or that N rule we had earlier. Let's say you didn't want to keep this here. We're gonna write another formula. Apply to range. Let's get to this. I'll just re-highlight this. Okay, add another row. Let's say I didn't want to keep this like true or false thing here. I can actually highlight this formula and put it into the conditional formatting. But I'm going to make sure that I lock the B and E rows or columns so that conditional formatting knows to stay within this region. Okay. Okay, so if I delete this, nothing else will turn green. If I move you up here, everything's back in just how we like it, okay? And so to just show that this conditional formatting changes, we'll make this Y. So that turns true and this turns green, just how we want it, okay? And so that's a great example to see just kind of using and or Countif examples. And so let's move on to a bit more of a number example. So I have these different expenses right here. We have how much we predict each one will cost, but then how much we actually spend on it. And so how about for this, we will, in this column, highlight anything that is greater than, if the actual is greater than the predicted, we want to highlight it red. Okay. So this is B, this is F39. It's greater than E39. Okay. We're going to want to highlight that red. Cool. And so that looks about right, correct? Yes. So these two are the ones that are higher than the predicted. So that's great. Pretty easy. And you can easily highlight the other one green. But let's see if we want to do some percentage rules here. So let's find how much percent off this is from this. Okay. And so to do that, we will go down and use this formula right here to just calculate percentages. Okay, cool. So it will be, oh gosh, handling two monitors at once. Okay, cool. All right. Are we ready to make this one? Yes, we are. Okay. Equals. I'm gonna put this in parentheses actually, to make sure that we see the math that's going on here. This minus this divided by this. All right, that's how you get a percent, correct? Okay, cool. Autofill. Thank you so much. Okay, so what this is telling us is that this number right here is negative 25% off of this number. And I'm sure if you calculated that is true. I trust sheets more than I trust my math skills, to be honest. And so let's say if our actual cost is less than negative 5%. So if it's greater than 5% off, so less than the predicted, we'll highlight it green. But if it's more than 5%, we'll highlight it red. So how about we just create some percentages right here? Okay, awesome. So let me make this negative. Okay, cool. And so what we're going to do is we're going to copy this formula. Well, how about we take a pause? Okay. Let's copy this formula. Okay, into here. Not the double equal. Let's put some parentheses so we know what's happening. Is less than this absolute reference. We're going to lock that. Make it true. Autofill. Thank you so much. And we can see that this is correct. Okay, these are all less than negative 5%. And so say we copy that formula, make it here, but now it's greater than, and then it's actually, it's going to be I38 now. And then we're going to lock that as well. Okay. Don't know why you change fonts all of a sudden, but that's okay. We can just change it back. I just like to keep things all the same. Okay, cool. Let's drag this down. All right. And so we see that we basically have the other, true or false conditions except for this 40, which is 0. because 0% is not less than -5, and it's not greater than 5. Okay, so now we can do our conditional formatting. So let's highlight this. Let's add a rule. Custom formula. Okay, cool. And now we're going to go and we're going to copy this. And we will notice that something's a bit off here. We are going to want to lock these rows. Okay, there you go. That looks a lot better. Cool. Now let's do the other rules. Okay, let's go copy this. Okay, cool. We're going to lock again. This is where absolute references come in. We need to lock it so that the conditional formatting knows what you're kind of supposed to be looking at. Okay, cool. Look, exactly what we wanted to see, right? So if it's greater than 5%, which is true, we wanted to see it be red. And if it's less, we'll have it be green. Awesome. Okay, so one last thing we can do with conditional formatting is this color scale right here. And so let's say I have these different fruits and how many fruits I have. And so I can apply a color scale to them. Okay, let's add a rule. It's actually going to be, make sure my range is right. It's going to be this tab called color scale. And so automatically we see that it like does math for you and like figures out what to scale each color to. I kind of like the highest number to be the darkest. So I'm going to change that for you. And so we see that, you know, they apply a nice little range for you. And so I can change the minimum value to be, you know, number. It tells you that the minimum in the data is 20, but you can make it, you know, 40. So now that means that 40 is white and 20 is white as well. And so, you know, you can play around with the color scale. That's really good for when your data on it kind of has natural ranges and you want to show those ranges really well. And so, yeah, that's kind of the gist of conditional formatting. I think it's really important to know when you're using like an AND or Countif situation, or you're doing, you know, a percent over here. You know, as long as you really do think about when you want to lock cells and use absolute references versus relative references, conditional formatting is really powerful to really convey what your data is saying very easily with, like, you know, different formatting and different colors. And so we're gonna take a little break and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna do some sorting and filtering data, which is really, really important and helpful in so many different things. All right, I hope that we enjoyed our little break. We're gonna get back into sorting and filtering data. So once again, I have some fruits and the number of fruits I have. And so I can sort these on various conditions that I want. And so what we're going to want to make sure is, even let's say I want this category alphabetical. If I just sort this, then this will change. But the numbers that, you know, correspond with that row, you know, I have 50 apples. Like I want to make sure that 50 stays with the amount of apples wherever apples goes in the list. Right? That's why I want to make sure I highlight both of these, you know, to keep its the label data with its data, right? So we're going to go data. We're going to sort range. Data has a header row, which it does. And so, well, if I do a header row, I'm going to have to highlight that as well. Okay. Fruits in reverse alphabetical order is from Z to A. Let's do that. All right, now we get watermelons at the top, which is great. And now let's say I want to sort by, you know, greatest frequency. Let's do that. Simple, simple. Everything's so much simpler when you have a header row, so make sure your data has that by frequency. And I want to do from greatest to least, which is descending order. There we go. Okay, cool. So that was sorting. Very small example, but I think it shows you a lot of different capabilities you can do. They have you that you can sort the whole sheet, which is helpful when you have a lot of data just on the sheet, except I have multiple things on the sheet right now, so I don't want to sort the whole sheet. But you know, sort range by column A, you know, they have it here to help you out as much as they can. So now let's talk a little bit about filtering. And so if we think about what a filter is, we're taking a lot of data and we're kind of putting it through like a filter and getting different data on the other side. And so how we're going to do that is let's start out by filtering out the fruits that start with P. And so if we, very, very visually look at the data, we can see peaches, pears, pineapples, right? Okay, let's do that. Easy way to start a filter is up here, but you can also go to data and then create a filter. But I'm going to do it up here just so that, we get a bit easier, more familiar with using this top menu bar. So let's create a filter. And so how you know it's a filter is these rows will turn green, and you're going to have this little filter sign right here. Okay, so let's filter out fruits. Let's start with B. So you're going to see this kind of data menu set up. You can also sort here. And you can filter by color. This is kind of when you have conditional formatting on. Condition is like formulas, by values. But because we have a kind of a small data set, we can just go down here. You can like uncheck this, right? Okay. So now we notice that we take that out, okay? And if I want to undo that, just press a little Control Z. So that's how you do a filter based on the fruits. You can do a filter based on frequency. Let's filter out the fruits that have frequency less than 75. So we're going to filter by condition. So it's going to be, I want the fruits that are greater than 75. This is kind of where logic comes in. Okay, and so now we see that we only have the ones that are greater than 75 right here. And so once again, small example, but I just want you to get comfortable using, different things. And as you get more and more data in different situations, you'll know how to apply different filtering and sorting. And so where this is really the big thing, I would say, is that when you have a Google form and you have all the sheet responses, sorting and filtering will save your life with that. You can sort it by alphabetical order based on last name. You can filter out people who say no to a certain question, and then, really sort it so you see exactly what form responses you have. You can filter out, different question answers sorted by different things. And then if you combine that with conditional formatting, and you turn things green, you turn things red, you can really have your sheet responses be really, really clear in what is happening with that. And so that, in combination, those two concepts are really, really important and can be really useful, I think, to a lot of college students. Since you fill out Google Forms, you get so many sheet responses, it's a lot of data. And so to handle that a bit more, those concepts are really helpful as well. So let's talk now a bit about removing duplicates. So there's an easy way to do it, and there's a hard way to do it. The hard way to do it is with conditional formatting and Countif. I don't think you should do that. I think it's a waste of time. And so if your data has headers, like, removing duplicates is easy. And so make sure your data has headers because it's good practice. So how we're going to do that is we're going to highlight this little data thing. So we have some companies and we have their prices. These are arbitrary numbers. And so visually looking, we do have duplicates. We have a Zoom right here. We have a Slack right here. And we have a Google duplicate, okay? So let's just go up here. We have data. Remove duplicates, okay? So data has a header row. Yes, it does. And so I want to remove things that are the same company. Okay, remove duplicates. And so they found 4 duplicate rows. Okay, awesome. And so now we only have the unique ones left. And because I had the price and the company set the same, I could do the same. But that's how you remove duplicates very easily. Simple. So now let's talk about trimming white space. And so what is white space actually? Do I have a white space? This is white space. This is what we mean. When you have, the text or the number in your cell, but then you also have like a space after it, right? And so do I have white space? I put it here so that I would know, because sometimes you can't visually see if you have white space. You can when you start manipulating data and it starts kind of messing you up. But to trim white space, we're just going to do data, trim white space. Awesome. So trim white space from 3 selected cells. So if we go back and we double check, no white space. No. Awesome. So that's how you trim white space very, very easily. Let's talk about distributing columns. And so this can definitely bug people when your columns are not split evenly. And so you know, I think the way most people are taught to do is you can like do this like, let me turn off this filter actually, so that it doesn't affect us. I gotta turn it off here, turn off filter, cool, awesome. So I think the way most people know how to adjust your columns is like this. It's like removing thing, make this big, this big, right? If you want it to fit to the data like perfectly, you can actually just double click, or not double click. So double click the white, the right. Should be. I don't know why it's not doing it for me right now, but that way. Oh, because I have it set to something. And so another way you can do it. It actually does work when you double click. So like if I went here and I saw this 22 and I want to fit to it, 22 would like easily. I think I have other things in that thing, but it will fit to this like thing perfectly. But another way I can do it is I can just that way. Data. No, I believe it's a right click actually. Is it? Where did it go? Come on, where did you go? Highlight. It will be in actually. It'll be right click resize column. Do we see resize column? Where did the resize column go? Oh, this is interesting. Oh, we have to select here, and then resize columns. There we go. There we go. Okay, so I can fit to the data. Let's do that one first. And so the reason why it doesn't look fit right now is because I have a lot of things in these columns, right? So I have like things right here. But if I had this on a new sheet, these would all like definitely go in. Okay, so distributing columns even, we have to highlight this up here. See small things. Small things I just sometimes can't remember on sheets that you just have to figure out in the moment. Come on, highlight. Come on, sheets. There we go. We are going to F, correct? Yes. Okay. So now let's go resize columns. And so this is a standard with the pixels. You can just call it 150. And so now everything's the same. And so sometimes that's useful as well for your data. If you're on a new sheet, you could obviously do this like double click thing and it'll work for you. Okay, so we're gonna take a little break. Those are some quick exercises, but we'll take a break before we finish up Vlookup, and then we'll start moving on to some more fun stuff as well. All right, now we're going to be talking about Vlookup, which is another very powerful formula in Sheets and Excel. And so what it stands for is vertical lookup. It basically looks down a column and tells you, what you're looking up. And so if we look at the parameters right here that it takes, it's a search key. So what you are searching for, the range, the index, and then whether or not it's sorted or not. And so let's see, we have some student IDs and we have some grades associated with it. And so this is not sorted, obviously, it's not in like number order. You could sort your data. You don't need to with VLOOKUP. That's kind of the beauty of it, that you don't always need to have it sorted. And so let's say now I have a new table. I have some student IDs. Now these are sorted. Now I want to know the grades that are associated with them based on this table. And so we're going to use some VLOOKUP right here. Let's go right here. VLOOKUP. Okay. All right. So the search key that we are looking for is we want to look for this ID in this table, right? And so we're going to click that cell. Okay. And what's the range that we are looking for? We're going to be looking in this range, right? How about we're going to lock that range, okay? And so now here's the index. This is where things can be a bit confusing. So in this range, we have one column and we have a second column. We want to know the grade associated with the student ID. So yeah, we want to look for this ID here. But we want the grade that's in this column. And so if this is column 1, this is column 2. So that's what the index is in this case. I hope that kind of makes sense. But if we consider the student ID that we're looking for column 1, if we just put a 1 here, we're just going to get the student ID back. But if we put a 2 here, we'll get the grade, which is the column after it. And so numbered from left to right. And if it's sorted, it is not sorted, so we're going to put false. Okay, cool. So we get a 90. Let's make sure that's double checked. So we get an N11 or N111. We get 90. And that is what VLOOKUP is doing for us. We will autofill because they are being nice. And so this, what's great about this is that this is looking for N222. And that right there is a relative reference, right? once again, looking to the left. We use the range as an absolute reference just to lock in that we're not moving anywhere within this. And we get the grade associated with it, which is row 1. Now, if I were to show you, change this to index 1, we will simply get the student ID, right? So that's why we want the grade. And so VLOOKUP really does depend on what you're looking for and what you have. As long as you follow these parameters and, you can play around with VLOOKUP a bit. And then if you don't remember these parameters, I believe that you can, if you type in a formula right here, it'll pop up here. I think there's also there's generally a question mark over here if you always forget. But the parameters are here. They give you examples of how to fill in things. And you can also Google all these formulas as well. So that's VLOOKUP, simple example, super powerful, really great in large sets of data. So rather than doing the natural control F of a data set, VLOOKUP is powerful when you're looking for very specific things, and it's very fast. So yes, that is kind of the intermediate stuff of sheets. Some tips I would have for intermediate kind of activities with what we did with starting off with you start off with getting rid of grid lines, hiding and freezing panes. Some tips is I would really hope that you hammer down this idea of relative and absolute references. It seems very simple on a very surface level thing, but as you go and apply it to more different situations, you'll see when you need to do absolute references or when you need a relative, and in combination with conditional formatting, you'll really be able to see that really well. And then as long as you, with conditional formatting, you have very clear ideas of what your rules are, and how you want to format things, and how those rules tell a story about my data that's very, very clear the moment you look at it. If you have that hammered down, then you'll be good. I think bottom line with sheets is as long as you have very clear intentions of what you're trying to do with your data, it will work. And you just kind of have to have a clear head when doing, the very, nitpicky of typing in the formulas and sorting the data and all that. And so, yes, now we're going to, and that's all the intermediate tips I have really. I think the distributing columns evenly is more of a visual things. The grid lines, the hiding, freeze panes, those are very visual things that will help kind of maneuver around your data sets a bit easier. And VLOOKUP is very specific to when you may need it. And so yes, that was kind of that. I think the biggest thing for intermediates is just practice. Biggest thing with sheets in general is just to practice as much as you can, really. And so what we're going to do is we're going to move on to some advanced things in sheets. And so this data table again, except this time we have lots of it. Well, I guess, yeah, 214, bigger than the normal data set that I just showed all of you. And so we're going to talk a little bit about a concept known as pivot tables. And so the big thing is that when you tell someone or a recruiter or an interviewer that sheets, Excel, this is what they're expecting to know. You need to know pivot tables. You need to be able to do it very quickly. You need to understand what is happening. If you say sheets and you don't know pivot tables, it's kind of going to be a bad way down. But actually, pivot tables are a very easy concept to understand. And so you need to have good data to do a pivot table. And what does that mean? Good data means, that, not that your data actually needs to be good, but formatting your data needs to be good, as in you need to have this header column of what your data is about. And so we see, we have some order IDs, some different products. As long as your headers tell you very clearly what is going on in the data, that is what you need. You need to have data that does not have any holes. So what that means is that there's no blank column. So if I inserted a blank column right here, that's not good data. You need to have no empty rows down here. So no empty line right here. Everything is filled. Everything is clean, no holes, good headers. That is good data. Okay, so how do we create a pivot table? We are going to select our data. If you select the top left corner of your data table, you can just press Control A, select it. You don't even have to scroll down. Okay, so let's go to data. And now we have a pivot table. So this is our range. That is correct. We're going to want to insert it to a new sheet. Okay, so let's create it. So now we get something like this. So we have all our data on this advanced sheet, but now we have a new sheet called pivot table 1. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about these labels in a bit. let's look at this right side column that popped up for us. So now they have some suggested pivot tables. Let's look at those. Okay, so average amount for each market. Let's look at that. So now we have the products here and the average amount. And so now I can do this double click. So this is the average amount that was sold in apples and bananas and all these different products. So this is a pivot table. And you're probably like, well, that seems very simple. Pivot tables are very simple. Because what it is doing is it's taking these big data sets, big data tables that have a lot of, numbers in it and doing very, doing sheets things and making it into a very clear and cohesive table that is small and tells you the point right away. So rather than going through all this data and being like, oh, I don't know the amount, automatically does it for you. And so let's talk about a little bit more about these rows and columns and values. So rows horizontally, right? And so that's the product. Product is in this column, but the info about it is in the row, right? So the info about apples is in the row. Columns we'll talk about in a bit, but the values. What they're telling you right now is not a column per se in pivot table vocabulary. It's a value. And so that's what you're showing the amount. So let's get rid of these. The greatest thing about pivot tables and sheets is that everything's a drop down. It's actually, I would say, in comparison to Excel, pivot tables on sheets is so much easier because it's drop down versus a checkbox on Excel, which can be a bit confusing. Let's look at some of them out for each country. And so again, we have country in the rows, right? And then we have values is the amount. Now, I can very easily change that. Let's say for each country, I want to add, the products, count of products, how many things that each country bought. And so you can do this, you can see that. Now, what if we add a column? Let's do it by date. Okay, let's not do it by date. Okay, yeah, there it is. Okay, so now this is what a column is that it's expanding this. Okay, now the values are still staying the same. We're still showing the amount of products that each country has bought, but now the columns show you very specific things like the dates. And so that's kind of in a pivot table where you can get confused with columns and values. Just think of values as showing the actual numbers, the actual data. Columns is just how another way to group things in pivot tables. And so let's say I can create a pivot date group. I can do it by quarter, which is a lot easier to look at. And so that's how you create a pivot table group. It's most often used for dates. The reason why they have those different things is the quarter is a big thing when we talk about stocks, and pivot tables are a big financial thing in that industry to just show data very clearly. So look, we can see how much each country bought in each quarter, see the grand total of everything. So this is what we're reading right here. This is the grand total of everything Australia bought. But then this total right here is everything that was bought in this quarter. So we can see in quarter one, 52 products were bought versus in quarter two, 64. And so you can obviously, if you don't want to see the totals, you can delete that. But yeah, that's kind of how you can, let me put that pivot table group again, see your data. Okay, so that was great. How about we do some sorting? So we can do some filtering out with this data. We can sort by country. Okay, cool. I scroll down. Showing all items. Right now we're showing all of our countries. And we'll say the only country we don't want to see is we don't want to see any country that starts with a U. So we're going to unclick those. And boom, we don't see their data in the pivot table anymore. We can sort things. We can sort things by... Oh, yes. Okay, so if we wanted, it's not in filtering. Yeah, we can sort by, it's in ascending order. The countries are in ascending order, so alphabetical right now. We can sort them in descending order. So now New Zealand goes to the top. And so yes, this is how you can do in descending order, and then all this. Okay, and so let's take all of that out. So this is why it's called a pivot table, is that you can easily pivot to various parts of the table. So let's add, how about we add products. So now we see all this. Let's add the amounts. So that's the sum of the amounts. Okay. And then we can add country. So now we see how much each country spent on which product. Okay. So that's just another thing you can look at with pivot tables. Pivot from one thing to another all the time. And it really depends on what your data is saying, what you want to convey about your data. Okay, so that's one pivot thing we can do. Let's just go to a suggested one. The average amount. Okay. And so once again, we can do like averages. Most of the time you can do some. So this is the total amount that was spent on all apples, but you can do the average. Okay, cool. And then maxes and mins and whatever, any of this that applies to your data. I'm doing for data, so it only makes sense to do really sum or average. But yes, okay. Let's talk about slicers. Bit of a weird concept, I think. Just gonna right click. So we went to this data tab and we see this filter. We worked with filters, no biggie. So let's open a slicer. This is what a slicer looks like. Okay, select column. Yeah, I can do it over here. Just slice the products, and then you notice that we get a very similar thing with the filtering, except now we can apply formulas to it. We can take out mangoes and bananas and stuff, and very surface level. It looks exactly like a filter. But there's a very big difference between a slicer and a filter in this case. Again, with slicers, you can but I guess with filters as well, you can apply custom formulas as well. So what is the difference? Why would I use a slicer? Why would I use a filter? Obviously, it feels easier to use a filter. The slicer thing does not look very appealing sometimes. It creates a new pop-up. It can get very confusing. So I would suggest using filters very early on in your pivot table when you still have very much raw data from your data table, because that filters things out. And if you notice something with the slicers, we really just deleted it off of the table. If you notice that this roasted from 2 to 5, that means we remove things right there. And so what that tells us is that the slicer is doing things very top level, very visually. It's literally just taking it off the data table, just not showing it. It literally deleted the rows. But filtering is literally taking that data out of the whole pool. And so the key difference is that slicers operate on canvas, so on your sheet. Filters are configured to operate in the background. And so if you know this distinction of when to use a slicer versus when to use a filter, yeah, that's really important. I would say that when you're using a formula other than sum, you're going to want to use a slicer, because once you start filtering data and then start doing math, it can get a bit odd. And so you just gotta watch out for that. But if you know the difference of when to use a slicer or filter, I think you're be good. I'm gonna remove the slicer just because I don't really like it. Delete slicer, and so we're gonna get all that back. And so one last thing about pivot tables I do want to say is, very bland colored pivot table we have, and so don't forget that it is a table. You can format it with alternating colors. Pick anything you like from here. Blue, you can mess with this. This is how people get nice tables on their thing that you may see on people's dashboards and stuff. So yeah, you can mess around with the alternating colors. On our practice sheets, we give you data to do pivot tables with. And just as long as you remember, a pivot table allows you to pivot from multiple things, change the rows, change the columns, change the values. Then you're good. You can do a lot of different things with it. Obviously, the first time you use a pivot table, you'll be like, oh my God, is this a row? Is this a column? Is this a value? Just play around with it, add it, delete it. It's super easy to go back and edit, pivot from one to another. Figure out if you need to filter your data, figure out if you need to slice your data. Pivot tables are powerful in that they took this really big data table and it made it into this small one that's super, super clear. And so you generally tend to use pivot tables when you're presenting data to someone. Like you want to prove to them that this is the thing that's working. And you don't want to give them the actual data. You want to show that the very clear statement your data is saying. So that's pivot tables. Remember, it works really well with large data sets. So yeah, I think pivot tables just takes a lot of practice. It can be really fun once you get the hang of it, to be honest. To just really like show different things. And I really hope that on the practice sheet, you're able to, play around and see like all the different combinations of pivot tables you're able to do. And so yeah, some last tips about pivot tables is, think about what formulas you want to do. You don't always have to show the average or the sum. You can, showing the median is sometimes something you may want to do. Don't forget that you can sort your data versus in ascending or descending, and then you can add things within the pivot table. If I add another row, country, what does that look like? So look, now we can see if for apples, what each country bought. Obviously this is a bit of a large pivot table, to be honest, but you can collapse these, or you can add totals and stuff like that. And so it's really just about playing around with it, clicking around. There's always a Control Z. Always go backwards. You can always undo what you did. So yes, that is pivot tables. I think we're going to take a break and then we'll go back and we'll talk about some query coming up. All right. Now we're going to be talking about some query. And I would say very much so that query is the most powerful function in Sheets and Excel. But way more than Vlookup. I think query is so powerful. It is based on SQL, which is structured query language. Like it's into a bit of coding, I would say, but we can learn it step by step. And you're gonna see what's so beautiful about query, I think. And at first you may be like, what are we doing? But I think over time, I think you'll start seeing why query is so powerful. And so let's look at our data. Once again, we need good data for query. And so we have countries, what continent they're on, and their population. So lots and lots of data. We scroll down, get a lot of countries and stuff. Okay, awesome. So let's start writing some query. We're going to just go into the column right here, F column. Let's do query. So let's look at the little parameters. Here is the question mark. So we're going to take our data, we're going to give them a query, and we're going to say if we have headers or not. So our data is our range. So that's just to make our lives a bit easier. We're going to create a named range, actually. And I'm going to go a bit more into depth in this in a bit. Let's create a named range. Name ranges. I'm just going to call it countries. So I'm not typing in this really long thing in a bit. So just call it done. Countries are awesome. Now we can start writing query, guys. Okay. Query. Our range is countries. And our query is what we want it to do. And so we're going to start off with select star. Okay. We're actually going to have it in quotes. We need it in quotes. Double quotes. Query is always in double quotes. Okay. And then do we have headers? If we have headers, we're going to say 1 because we do have headers, right? Okay. Now we're press enter. And you're going to be like, well, what are we doing? We just got back what we just had. And that is true because we just use query to select all. So what we did is we just selected all of these columns right here. We pasted right here. That is query. And you're like, well, could have just copied and pasted. And you're right. Yes, you're right. But that's because I chose to select all with this little star. The star right here means all. But I can just choose to select B, C, and D. So let's do that. So let's select only B and D for right now. So we see the country and their population. We'll just change this to B, D. All right, there we go. So now we just see those. So that's great. But now we're still seeing a lot of data. Let's say I want to limit the population to only if it's greater than 100 million. And so that has to do with the population number. That has to do with column D of this table. And so I really only want to show the data that's where column D is greater than 100 million. So let's go to our query. Okay, select B and D, where D is greater than 100 million. So 6, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Let's press enter. Okay, awesome. So now we shrunk our data so that we only see the top populations. And so let's talk about a little bit about what we started doing. So our name range doesn't change because we're still going to look at all this country data. That's the orange thing. In this quote, our query is starting to change. We're going to want to start doing different things and getting different queries. So first we did the select all, which is select star. Then we did select B and D, where we selected very specific columns of the table. But then now we added a where clause or keyword. And I like to have the keywords in all caps, so just so that you know. Where D is greater than 100 million. And so that was our query. It's kind of like a request, I would say. I guess it's also what the definition of query is. But it's just the different things you really want to do through data. And so that's great. How about we take out the 100 million? We'll just look at all of our data for right now. Let's go back to this. So how about we add the complements, might as well see. Comma. Okay, awesome. And so what if we want, to order our data by ascending order? So that's smallest to largest. And so that's simple. We can just go here and we can do the keyword order by. And we're going to want to order the population. So that's column D. And ascending order. So it's another keyword. So it's ASC. Okay. So awesome. Now we see it in ascending order. We can also do it in descending order, which is kind of what we had before, but yes. And so we're starting to write SQL. We're actually doing it. And so let's go back to ascending just to see, what's happening here. So yeah, in ascending order, population, but it corresponds with the country, so which is really good. So we see that Vatican City, which I didn't know was a country. I actually don't know most of these countries. I should probably get my geography a bit better. Has a population of about 800. And so that's how we can see it. Okay. So let's say I only want to see the 10 smallest populations. So now we're going to do order by. We're just still going to have it ascending because we want it from smallest to greatest. But we're going to limit 10. So now we only see the 10, right? 5, 10. So limit is another keyword that we have in the query language. So that's great. We can also do some math with the query function, within this line of text. We can divide the population by the world's total, which is around 7 billion, something, to get the percentage of the population in each country. And so how we're going to do that, we're going to take out this order by and this limit 10. So let's go back to here. All the countries, all their populations. But now we're going to kind of change what we're seeing in this population column. So we're going to change this D right here. So it's going to be the column D, so the numbers in D, divided by the total population, which is probably maybe a bit outdated as our population keeps growing, but it's that big number. And then we want it as a percent. We're going to multiply by 100. Okay, that's our query. So now we get percentages. So now we see that China is almost 19% of the whole world's population, which is very crazy. And so, but look at this. This is very ugly. Product quotient population number 100. That's an ugly header column. Let's fix that. So now we're going to do the label clause. This allows you to label, your header columns of your query data table. So we're going to label. We want to label this column that we just did. So we're going to kind of copy and paste this. So what we just did with that column, copy and paste it, space, and now we want it to be just called percentage. And because we're already in double quotes, how we want to name this is in single quotes. So single quotes, percentage. Okay. And so look, now we just took that really, really nasty header column or header, and we made it into just percentage. And so that shows you a lot more, you could have called it percentage of population, whatever you wanted to label it. But that's your label clause in action right there. And I wanted to do with a kind of a nasty example. So yeah, label it right there. All right, let's see. We're going to now talk about some aggregation of our data. So let's take this out. Right. Okay. Let's take this one. Okay. So remember, our query stays in double quotes. It should always be in green. Your range should always be in orange. The one should just kind of be there. The one doesn't really change, but your query does. And so let's do some aggregation. And what that means is like taking the mins, the maxes, the medians, all that stuff. So let's select the maximum population. Population is in column D. So let's select max of D. Let's select the minimum population, which is the minimum of D. And let's select the average population, which is the average of D. Okay, let's see if that shows us. All right, there you go. We were just able to see that super simple in query language. And so yeah, that's another thing we can do. We can aggregate all of our data into very clear, cohesive, very easy to see data tables. So let's do the last clause I'm going to go over, which is group by. This is probably the hardest part about query, group by, but we can do it. Okay, I will be honest. So let's select C. So this is a continent. Okay, and I'm just going to write out of the query, and then we're going to explain it later. And we're going to count it by B, and then group it by C. Okay, what does that mean? Oh, did I forget a comma somewhere? Select C, comma, count B, group by C. Oh, group by. I forgot it by. Okay, there we go. Okay. So let's go over that. What are we looking at? We're looking at different continents, and we see the amount of countries in each continent. Okay, that makes sense, right? Simple. We see the amount of countries in each continent. Yeah. So what is this? This weird select C, count by, group by kind of thing happening. So we selected C, which is the continent column, right? We then count the countries. We count B. Okay, so we count the countries that are located. We just count the countries. This is what this part is. But by grouping them by C, what that means is we are counting the countries and grouping them in what continent they are. So very similar, just like however many countries are in each continent. That is what we're doing. We're grouping it by C, which is the continent. Okay. And so yeah, that is group by. We're going to see a bit of a different query now. I'm going to write it out for us. Okay. By B, we're going to show the minimum population, maximum population, the average population, and then we're going to group by C. We're going to order it by the average of D in descending order, and we're going to limit it by 3. Okay. Wow, what did we just do? I wrote out the formula first, just so we can see what happens if I did. Okay, let's go through this. Okay. So we select C. We're good with that. We're good with the selecting. Selecting is always fun. We're going to select the continents column. Okay. Count B and then group by C. Okay, we've done that. We saw this before. We're basically just counting the amount of countries in the continent. Okay, but then we only present the max of that. Yes, because then well, not exactly the max of that, but we present the max, minimum, and average population on each of those continents, right? Which is, these columns right here. So that means in Asia, where there's 50 countries, the minimum population is this, the maximum population is that, which is very much China, and this is the average. Okay, so that's kind of this min D, max D, average D. We're going to group it by C again because we don't want it all by continent. And then we're going to order the average of D, so this column right here, by descending, so which means from greatest to least, so highest to lowest. And then we're going to limit by 3, which means we only show the top 3. And so yeah, once you break down the query formula into parts, you'll be able to see exactly what's happening. And so it can be really overwhelming to see this really long formula. And, even though the table is very concise, the formula is very long. Yeah. As long as you break down the query formula into parts, you'll be good. And so just take it piece by piece, clause by clause, keyword by keyword. So let's just review what keywords we did go over. So we started out with select all, so select star. Then we went into select specific ones, so column B, C, D. We could have done A, doesn't really say much to us at this point. So that's selecting specific ones. Then we went into where, so that you can limit, where the population is greater than 100 million. Then we did the order by. So then we did, you can order it by greatest to greatest, ascending, descending. Then we did limit, so we can limit just however many, entries of these results we see. Here we limited by 3. The previous example limit, we limited by 10. And lastly, we did some arithmetic functions with the minimum, maximum, average. I'm sure you can also do other, mathematical ones as well. Then we did the label clause to take that really nasty header with that population percentage and just turn it into percentage. And then we did some more aggregation. And then we did group by, which is what we just did. And now we kind of saw kind of the overall, wanted to combine all of our things into one formula. And so what just happened? What did we just do with query? And so let's talk about that, because I think, the first time you see query, you're like, well, why are we writing this? That was very much how I thought about it as well. Because very surface level, it looks like exactly what we're doing with pivot tables. Like we can easily show however many countries and continents and all that with pivot tables. And we can sort things, we can do math, minimum, maximum, average with pivot tables. We can, grouping by is like, the rows, we can order it by ascending, descending. Limiting is essentially filtering out. And so why are we using query? Why don't we just use pivot tables and sorting and filtering? Here's why we use query. If you notice, when we had the pivot table, we had this data over here, but our pivot table was technically over here. Look at this mess of a pivot table I left it off on. Don't do pivot tables like this. Here, I'm going to take this out to make it easier. This pivot table is really nice and concise, but it is on a new sheet. And while you can copy onto a different one, what query lets you do is we just made all these different tables and all these different examples right next to our data. We didn't need to make a new sheet. We didn't need to go in an existing sheet. We did it right next to it. We can see our data. We can see what we're trying to do with it. And so that's really convenient. You're not switching between sheets as often. And so what else were we doing? We were doing it all in one line of formula. We didn't really click around that much. With pivot tables, you're clicking rows, columns, sorting, different things. Whereas with query, we just typed it out. We typed out exactly what we wanted. Yeah, there were keywords that we kind of had to learn along the way, but the keywords can be self-explanatory sometimes as well. Query did it all in one line. We didn't have to mess with anything else. We stayed in this F1 column and just typed here, changed our query within these double quotes, and it did it for us. That's what's so powerful about query, is that you can just do it in one line. SQL is incredibly powerful if you know all the different advanced keywords and what you can do with it. And it's the reason why we teach it after pivot tables is because query is like pivot tables on steroids. It's so much easier to use query once you understand the keywords and know it. And it's just so much easier. I would say it's so beautiful. I was like, first when I saw query, I was like, this is crazy. Like, why is this necessary? Because I was like, pivot tables are where it's at. But then I saw it, and I think it takes a while to realize, but the power and amount of things you can do with query is incredible. It outnumbers really what pivot tables can do. And it's so much easier by just typing this all out. Yeah, you're gonna have to get used to like typing things and not having spelling errors. But Sheets is smart, they'll tell you when there's errors, and it's just whatever your query is, you can do a query, and so that's super helpful, super powerful. I definitely recommend playing around with that. Taking the data we have on the practice sheet with the pivot tables and using query right next to it. And it's super helpful. And so yes, that was pivot tables, that was query. I think we're going to take a break, and then we're going to go into kind of the last stretch of sheets, which is arrays, macros, and then some last little tips as well. All right, we are in the last stretch of sheets right now. And so what we're gonna start with is name ranges. You saw me create do a name range, but let's talk about it a bit more. And so with this one, a named range is basically it takes a range of data, and rather than putting in like the A1 to F36 every time, you can just put in the name of it. It's very much easy. That's what we did in query. I mean, it just quickens things a lot. So if I select this, I create a name range. I can call it, what would I like to call it? I can call it fruits, or I can call it food, because it's food. It's not just fruit. It's fruit and vegetables. And so now, whenever I do any formula of this, I can just use food rather than typing in advanced A1 through F214. Just write food. So much easier. So definitely name your ranges. So that's just easier to use them in formulas. So yeah, that's a name range. And so now we're going to talk a little bit more about arrays. So what are arrays? Supposedly everyone's favorite data structure. It's the first one you kind of tend to learn in CS 31 and 32. So I'm sure you're thinking of arrays in like very CS kind of concept, and that very much translates to exactly what's happening in Sheets. And so how to create an array rather than the square brackets in coding in Sheets, it's actually the curly brackets. And so I can create an array. If I do equals this array, I'm going to highlight this number of fruits, and it. So if I press enter, I'm just going to see the array pop up, which is exactly what we saw. So yeah, this was the array. I can also concatenate onto the array by the comma. So concatenating is just adding it to the end. So if we think of our list of items as 7, 1, 12, 20, 30, 30 is the last one. If we concatenate, we just add after 30. So if I add, let's say add this range. Okay, cool. Now we just get more values. Okay. We can also sum in the array. Freaking out here, combining my words. This is probably where arrays are the most powerful, with sums, to be honest. You can apply really great formulas with them. So what we're going to do is we're going to do equals array formula. Okay, cool. We're going to sum. Okay. We're going to do sum this times the cost. Okay. That is it. We're going to get 4005. And so what's actually happening in this array formula? So we took the contents of this array, the I2 to I6. So that's 7, and then we multiplied it by J2. So therefore, we really just multiplied 7 times 30 cents, 1 times 2.99, 12 times this times this times this, and we summed it. And if you didn't use an array, you can just probably do equals, multiply. Is it not multiply? Multiply is a formula, correct? Yeah. It's like, am I tripping? And then this one, you could have just done that. Did that. And then you could have done this equals sum this range. You could have done that. That would have been very much the same thing. But I think with array formulas, it's so much easier to see what's exactly happening. And so, yeah, so we basically just, took this little half array and then multiplied it by these, this basically. But we did that in array form, and that was a really convenient way to use an array formula. And you can check out which formulas you want to use for which data manipulation. And so arrays, not often used. They're not really the first thing you jump to use, but when you do use them, they can be really, really helpful. And so let's talk about a little bit more about macros, which I think is kind of a new concept to a lot of people. So macros, automatic tasks with macros is exactly what it sounds like. It's doing very repetitive tasks and just like automating it. Sheets will know what the macro is, it will do it. So let's start with a very, very simple example of macros. So I have this data set. 1, 2, 3. Let's go 4, 5, 6. Okay. So let's say how we're going to start a macro. We're going to go to tools, macros. Let's record a macro. So now we see this dot right here, down here recording. We're going to highlight this column, and we're going to, let's just say we're going to center it. Okay, so look, that was our action. We set format style. Save. We're going to call it center. We can have a number optional. I'm not going to do that. Okay, cool. So that's our macro. So what is happening here? Let's say for some reason this got shifted like here. Okay. If we go back here, we run our macro called center. It basically just took that and recentered it. Exactly what we did when we recorded the macro. It did it for us. And so what's super interesting about macros is that you can actually open the script editor. This is where coding starts coming in, and why we teach macros after we go with arrays. And so look, we have some macros. Here were some other macros I was just kind of playing around with. But we look down here, the center one. So let's break this down. Variable spreadsheet equals spreadsheet.app.getActive. That's probably just something to set up the spreadsheet object. We get the range M1 through M6, and we activate it, which is exactly what we did. So that's basically selecting what we did. And then we just set horizontal alignment to center. And so what we did with this macro right here was very visual, right? We highlighted, we press this, we press center. But what else you can do is you can code your macros like within the script editor I'm sure it's not too hard to like learn this language. And actually all G Suite products are, you can do app scripts with them, which is really, really incredible because it's so powerful because you can start combining different G Suite products together in the app script. So that's a very simple example of macro. And, you can do it with, like sorting your data, different things, very repetitive tasks that you're doing that you definitely could record it with a macro. And so the reason why I want to show you the app script a bit more than the macros, to be honest, is if you write code here and you run it, you debug it, you can do all this stuff with it. Bunch of settings you can do. This is how people make dashboards on Excel and Sheets. What you may see as like, all those graphs, all those things that are happening on a Sheets dashboard, it's happening in the app script. And so, project management plans on Sheets, have to do with all this code. You can add an if statements, functions, exactly what coding itself is just on Sheets. And you can deploy it onto your Sheets, onto your project, and it'll be able to do different things on your Sheets for you. And so while everything we've taught you so far is very like what you're doing with clicking in things, you can very much do it with app script and coding if that's more of your style of doing things. Very much a bit more back end, things with this. But yeah, the app script is super helpful if you understand what's happening with it. And so yeah, I definitely recommend you take a look at it if coding is your thing. If Sheets and coding is your thing together, combined. Sheets is more my thing than coding, to be honest. So I don't really use app script that much. But if I wanted to make a dashboard, if I wanted to make a very updatable project plan for my team, I would definitely use app script and deploy something. Although there are project plans online that you can definitely find and purchase. People monetizing Google Sheets because people think that you can't learn Google Sheets. You can. You absolutely can. If you made it to this part, I hope that you've learned a lot. If not, then the subtitles are always there for you to learn from. Watching a video isn't exactly how you do it. So let's talk a little bit more about some add-ons, which you'll see under this tab. Get add-ons. See what pops up. Let's see what Google wants me to get from these add-ons. Okay. Yeah, a lot of different things. Right here you can see what apps they work for. So yeah, a bunch of things. I would definitely recommend Google Analytics because it lets you chart and visualize, record like websites to your drive. And so yeah, I think what other ones do I really like? Let's see, where are they? Just a lot of like AutoCAD's actually pretty helpful. It converts spreadsheets to PDFs and it's compatible with Google Slides, which is really helpful. I think there's one called Table Styles that lets you style your table right. Advanced find and replace, but it lets you replace Control F. I think there's an email address extractor. Email address extractor. This is really helpful for when you have that like form response sheet. You just want to extract emails and send bulk emails that way. So yeah, that's a lot of add-ons you can add to this. And so tips for advanced. So what did we cover in advanced? We covered pivot tables, query, arrays, macros, name ranges, and then the app script, which I didn't go too into because that's a coding lesson basically. And we're here to learn Sheets. And so tips for doing all that. especially with pivot tables and query, I would really say to have a clear idea of what you want your data to show, because that will help you. Obviously, if you didn't really analyze the data first, or make graphs, then you can play around with pivot tables and query, um, and kind of see. But visually, if you don't think you're ready to start using query yet, visually start with pivot tables, because it will help you click around, play around with it, control Z if you need to, and undo, um, and see what are the rows, what are the columns, what are the values, what can I play around, what can I pivot from one to the other with, versus query is super powerful, but I think you do need to have kind of a bit deeper understanding of what's happening with your data to show. Not that you can't play around with query, but so with query, I would say some tips are just to really understand that there are keywords, and that those keywords let you do different things, that your named range is in orange, that your query is in quotes. I like to capitalize my keywords just so I know, and that if you have headers, it's just a one here. You can do a bunch of different things. You can keep learning query techniques. I only showed you the first few basic ones, but you can learn like pivot. You can learn how to like add totals to your query, and all this stuff online. More advanced query functions. And so yeah, that's that. With arrays, I would say, figure out when they're helpful. Are you doing like kind of this like cross multiplying? Maybe use an array. There's a lot of formulas that are helpful with arrays. Macros, I would say, if you're doing the same task over and over, definitely automate it. And so yeah, last little thing I kind of want to talk about is if I'm going to do a control backslash. So these are keyboard shortcuts. Here's kind of my opinion on keyboard shortcuts. I may be in the minority with this, but I don't think they're necessary. I think there's a few that are good, like F4, which is absolute locking of your cell, which is the dollar signs. I think Control C and Control V are helpful. Copy and paste. I don't think you need to know keyboard shortcuts. I'm not gonna lie. Like I think, like how many times am I gonna need to, like do all this? You don't have to memorize this. You don't have to understand. You Control Shift Alt D. Like I'm not gonna remember that. Unless you're doing it over and over again. Like if I find myself, like doing the same action, bolding cells, Control B, fine. But I would really only say look for a keyboard shortcut when you do the same task 1,000 times. You understand what that task is doing, and then you can find a keyboard shortcut. But I think if you're just starting out, you're learning from G Suite right now, you don't need keyboard shortcuts. You really don't ever really need them. I think Sheets is about understanding what's happening with your data, the ability to make pivot tables and graphs and formulas, and to utilize that to show your data. Like conceptually, that understanding is needed before you start using a keyboard shortcut. That is just kind of my thoughts about keyboard shortcuts. I don't think you need them. They're helpful sometimes, but I don't think so. And if you find yourself really using Sheets in Excel all the time, I really do recommend getting different keyboards and like mouses for Sheets. They're actually quite interesting. Your keyboard is kind of like it's okay as long as you have the F buttons. I would say for an Excel keyboard. No, I don't want it for you, but thank you. I would say this mouse, if you're really using Sheets all day in Excel, this mouse is great. I swear by this mouse. I swear by it. For Sheets, you can do a horizontal scroll. You have a really precise scroll wheel. And then you can program these to do exactly what you're doing all the time. And so those are definitely some great, extra touches if you're using Sheets all the time. If you're doing it, for projects and stuff, then as long as you understand the basics of it. I think in college, a lot of what you're doing with Sheets is conditional formatting and sorting and filtering. You're not really, if you have big sets of data, which I don't really understand why, maybe you're doing research and you have big sets of data, then pivot tables, graphs, query. But, I think really the main things the solid things you know in Sheets are this intermediate stuff. So I think at the bottom line, like you just have to practice. We have practice sheets for you. I hope they're linked somewhere in the description of this video. But if you practice, the answer keys is there for you. The formulas are there for you. You just gotta keep learning and keep practicing with it. Sometimes Sheets is gonna frustrate you. I think that's why a lot of people are steered away from sheets because it's kind of overwhelming when you first look at it. Like what are all these buttons at the top? What is column stats? What is split text columns? Like what is all that? And I get that it can be very overwhelming, but I hope that our subtitles in G Suite episode 2 is able to help you kind of feel a bit less overwhelmed. That you kind of know a bit more what's going on in these columns. Finally know what conditional formatting and alternating colors does, and all these different things with data. I hope we're able to help you at least a bit. And so yeah, any other questions about G Suite, like feel free to contact Christine and I. Practice sheets and answer keys are there for you to practice. Subtitles, has hit about 70 pages now. Sheets info, definitely use that whenever you need. And so yeah, I hope that this was a helpful episode in learning sheets. And yeah, thank you so much.